Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Under Attack, How Accounts Payable Leaders Can Outpace Cyber Criminals and Payment Fraud. Today's webinar is brought to you by onPhase. My name is Mark Brousseau, President Brousseau and Associates. It's my pleasure to be your co-presenter for today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially get started. To ensure call quality, everyone's voice lines have been muted today. We encourage you to ask questions throughout today's webinar. To do so, simply use the Q&A tool on your screen to submit your questions to me. Domingo and I will answer your questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. And finally, an on-demand recording of today's webinar will be made available to all of you within the next few business days. We encourage you to share it with your coworkers and your peers. I'm pleased today to be joined by Domingo Pichardo, the CTO of onPhase. Hey, Domingo, how are you?
Hey, Mark, thank you so much. I am doing fantastic today. Eager to get this started, share this fabulous content that the team has put together, and answer some exciting questions for people.
Indeed. Before we dive into our topic of today's webinar, we thought we'd give Domingo a few moments to tell you a little bit about the sponsor of today's webinar, onPhase. Dom?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming and showing here today. Great attendance. Here at OnPhase, we're here to help teams reclaim their most valuable resource. You got it, time. That's what we all wish we had just a little bit more every day. And not just by adding another tool at your disposal where you can go and do more tasks and take up more of your time, but by providing true automation, getting you complete automation so that you can focus on the things that matter for your organization, strategic work. Your partner in security and automation for 25 years. Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We take security and compliance very serious. We work with a lot of customers who one of their most important things, in addition to time, is their compliance and security of their data. Here are just some of the most notable certifications or compliance that we have achieved over the years. SOC 2 and SOC 1, both Type 2 compliance. We are an AWS Premier Partner. We comply with NACHA. We have PCI compliance. We actually have a compliance for the country of California. Yeah, they have their own. It's called CCPA. So we take this very seriously. As you see, we like to take things, to the next level when it comes to that. And so security is a very important thing. I do with all kidding and joke aside. So automation solutions in the office of finance often looks like this. A little bit disparate, right? You have, some software that maybe you manage some employee files, employee onboarding, IT requests, contracts. On automation, you may be dealing with an AP automation solution similar, but not quite as good as onPhase. Purchase request automation, AR automation, etc. And of course, you eventually have to pay that invoice. So yet switching, to another system to take care of those things. Well, we kind of think of those things slightly different. We like to think of this as the journey of an invoice. At onPhase, we're able to offer customers a way to capture their data, automate their AP processes, and then pay their suppliers all in one platform, a unified experience, if you will, to transform teams from a cost center into a strategic value driver that safeguards the organizations and, of course, your bottom line. But that was just a little bit about onPhase, what we offer, what we can do. Let's really dive into this agenda. Mark, would you like to take it over from here?
Thank you so much, Dom. Well, if it feels like your organization's risk of falling victim to cyber crimes and payment fraud is higher these days, you're not alone. Interpol, states attorneys general, the FBI, a who's who of people you never want knocking at your front door are all sounding the alarm. They're saying that the way that we're doing things these days, and accounts payable is leaving us open to fraud. And unfortunately, the data supports this. 71% of all organizations were the victim of attempted or actual payment fraud in just the past year. That's according to the Association for Financial Professionals. 60% of all businesses experienced check fraud. And unfortunately, only 20% of all losses from fraud are ever recovered. It's a top of mind issue for AP leaders, and it's getting worse, not better. During today's webinar, we're going to provide you with some best practices for mitigating your organization's risk of fraud. We'll dive deep into those emerging AP fraud threats, show you the latest schemes and what it is that fraudsters are trying to do. We're going to show you how some of the traditional AP processes that so many of us rely on are unwittingly leaving us vulnerable to fraud. We're going to provide you with some best practices for detecting and preventing payment fraud. We'll show you how automation can play a huge role in leveling the playing field with fraudsters. And we're going to leave you with an action plan for mitigating your organization's risks. And as I said earlier, of course, we're going to provide plenty of time for your questions, so we encourage you to ask them throughout the webinar. But before we do any of that, well, we wanted to dive into our first poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. I want to know, which type of fraud has your accounts payable team encountered most often? Which type of fraud has your accounts payable team encountered most often? Phony supplier bank account change requests, fake or duplicate invoices, business email compromise or executive impersonation, stolen or intercepted paper checks, or you're not experienced to any of these, but you still admit you're concerned. Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Dom, we know that payment fraud isn't a new thing in accounts payable, but what makes it different these days compared to the fraud that we used to experience, say, 5 or 6 years ago?
Mark, criminals are always right trying to get ahead, right? And so they are as advanced as many of us in the industry, in professional roles, with the disposal of technologies that we have, right? AI is playing an amazing role in these things, right? A fraudster can impersonate a banking institution in a matter of minutes, and you have to have a keen eye to kind of tell the fake from the real one, right? And it becomes sort of something that you just now have to be constantly alert. We as humans, it's very simple for us to interpose, that I with that L, or something like this. Much more difficult if you have automation and fraud detection tools and things of that nature in place. It's not impossible, but it makes it a lot harder.
How well prepared do you think most AP departments are from a systems and process standpoint to meet the challenge of these increasingly sophisticated fraud schemes?
I think despite a lot of companies putting a lot of effort into anti-fraud solutions, it is so easy because what they usually do is they go after the individual. They're not breaking down your network. They're not accessing systems. They are getting to the most vulnerable endpoint, and that is the human nature, unfortunately.
Yeah, I love spoilers, Dom. Anyone who knows me knows that. I need to know how the Marvel movie ends before I go to the theater. Uh, so give me a spoiler here. What's the single most important piece of advice you'd give to our attendees today to mitigate their organization's risk of fraud?
Pay close attention, invest in automation. You have to question everything. If you have high volume, you can only do so much manually, right? So trusting a company, trusting a partner that actually can help you in the space is number one. That would be one of the many advices I have, Mark. We could, if you get me started, go here for days. So careful.
Well, don't give away all the goods yet. We got to fill the next 52 minutes. Hey, let's see how everyone responded to the poll question. We asked you, Which type of fraud has your accounts payable team encountered the most often? We have a tie here, Dom, and not really surprised.
Interesting.
32% of our attendees identified phony supplier bank account change requests. Another 32% identified business email compromise and executive impersonation. We'll dive into phony bank account change requests in just a moment, but what makes BEC schemes so insidious, Dom? What is it about them that's just so leaves us so vulnerable?
It's as individuals, right? Whenever we hear executive wants X, we just put the guard down, unfortunately. I remember just a couple of years ago, who hasn't heard about the gift card? I'm in a meeting with so and so and so. Please go get me three $100 cards ASAP and call me with the numbers. We sort of put the guards down when we hear somebody who is a superior or somebody who is in an executive role um, asking for something, especially from us. We want to be supportive. We want to be able to provide assistance. And so sometimes we'll let my guard down. I've seen that so many times.
Yeah, I love that gift card story. I forgot about those scams. All right, so for all of you out there in attendees, I want to know what types of audacious schemes you're seeing. Fire up the Q&A tool on your screen. Go ahead. I'll wait. Fire up your Q&A tool and let me know what it is the most audacious or clever or even common, if you want to be boring, scheme that you're seeing in your AP department today. Well, while they do that, the fact is that today fraud is a big challenge for organizations. 25% of all IOFM members say they're concerned about fraud and compliance risks as their number one challenge. That tops things like exceptions and reducing costs and dealing with supplier increase, the types of things we've historically seen AP leaders focused on. And one of the big reasons for that is that our threat is rising. Fact is that today businesses lose billions of dollars every year to payment fraud. In fact, here in the United States, more money is lost every year to BEC schemes than to bank robberies. Now, I know bank robberies are far more exciting than BEC schemes, but these are the stats the FBI gives me to work with. And the fact is that these cyber crimes are evolving faster than our defenses and accounts payable. I'm old enough to remember when payment fraud in AP was always equated typically with checks, right? And there was no sophistication in check fraud. You just stole it once it left someone's hand. In fact, in some cases, you didn't even have to bother whitewashing the check in order to get it deposited into your account. Well, today's schemes are far more sophisticated. In many cases, the fraudsters are well-funded businesses. In some cases, they're funded by Eastern European countries. One recent fraud scheme that was broken up had 500 employees, an HR department to recruit fraudsters, and a marketing department to sell their ill-gotten data. And today it's AP that is the number one target of these bad actors. They know that AP sits on sensitive data that's valuable to them. And they know that you're the last line of defense in releasing those payments for an organization. The problem is in most of our AP departments that every one of those manual steps that so many of us rely on introduces an opportunity for fraudsters to get one over on us. There's a couple of schemes that fraudsters are employing these days, and most of them are being enabled by the same types of technologies that AP departments, quite frankly, have been slow to deploy. Consider business email compromise, the fastest growing type of digital payment fraud. These are cases where a fraudster spoofs an executive or, say, a vendor's email. And now we're also seeing cases where they're using voice or text. They urge you to change bank account details. In some cases, they suggest that the supply chain for the company will come crashing to a halt if this bank change isn't made instantly. And being the rule followers that we are, the people pleasers that we are in AP, we're very inclined to make these changes. And if we cut one corner, if we don't verify that data, well, as soon as that money hits the fraudster's bank account, it's almost instantly swept away, in most cases, to multiple other faraway bank accounts where it's really hard to recover. We're also seeing more and more cases of vendor impersonation, and this really became a big issue back in COVID when so much of corporate America started to depend heavily on email as our source of communications. Today, it's not just our emails that we have to worry about getting hacked, it's also the emails of our suppliers. Once a fraudster has hacked an email for a coworker or a supplier, now they're able to infiltrate our AP process flows. In some cases, they initiate invoices on behalf of a supplier, just changing the remittance details. In other cases, they're as sophisticated as cloning websites of our suppliers. Perhaps you received these emails. Hey, it's time to update the details for our supplier portal. Come on and plug it in here and choose a new password. Problem is if you don't look carefully, you might not notice that that URL is one character off, or maybe it's got a backslash with a little different location, one that's been created by a fraudster to capture your credentials. We also see more and more cases of phony bank account change requests. Here again, email is the culprit. Fraudsters will submit falsified bank details and try to trick you into directing funds into an account that they control. Artificial intelligence is allowing fraudsters to do things like mimic voice. Goodness, if they ever do mine, or if they're, or even an image of someone asking you to change a bank account. And finally, as Dom was suggesting, a lot of this depends not on the fraudster hacking a system, but on tricking someone. And that's where social engineering comes into play. In many cases, fraudsters will make a target of someone. They'll use social media to be able to identify who works in an AP or AR department. And then that's the person that they go after. Try to target their email, hack, understand how they communicate with coworkers and business partners, and this is when they perpetrate their crime. As I said, one of the most insidious crimes these days is phony bank account change requests. Fact is only about 18% of all AP departments currently use an automated solution for verifying bank account ownership. And the problem is we can't trust who's on the other side of those emails. And in many cases, we can't even trust who's on the other side of that phone call, even if it sounds like the person who we know and love. And so what you will find is fraudsters will send an email once they've hacked into a supplier's account and pose as that supplier, or maybe it's even our CFO. They'll mimic the tone, the format, even the email domains. And the goal is to get you to change those bank account details. You might be wondering yourself, just how hard is it to trick someone into changing these bank account details? Let me tell you a story. Last year, I spoke at an AP conference on fraud. And after the conference, one of the attendees came up to me and said, "Hey, Mark, I got to thank you. You talked about these phony bank account change requests last year." And I went home after the conference and I talked to the most tech savvy person I knew, her 14-year-old son. And at dinner, she said to her son, she said, "Hey, this guy told me that there's this issue with phony bank account change requests. Do you think you could create one to trick your mom?" Now, anyone who has had kids knows there's nothing our kids love better than pulling one over on their parents. So as she told the story, she said that that he ran up the stairs, and in the time it took her to wash the dishes for dinner that night, about 20 minutes, he came bounding down the stairs, piece of paper in hand, and what she saw absolutely horrified her. All she had done was told her son the name of one supplier who her company does business with. At the top of that piece of paper, wouldn't you know it, was that company's logo. Well, she didn't give him that. And then there was this beautifully written business letter requesting that the bank account details be changed. Well, hold on a second. You don't write like this, 14-year-old son. Where'd you get this? Well, there's examples on the web, he said. And then in the letter, she was horrified. It had the name of that supplier's actual bank. Well, where'd you find this? She said. We said, oh, I did a quick Google search and the bank listed them as a client. And then at the bottom of that letter, it had the name of the person in AR who she deals with all the time at that supplier. Well, where did you get this? She wondered. And he said, well, Mom, you're connected to this guy on LinkedIn. And that's when she knew she had a problem. But this is what we're up against. In 20 minutes, a 14-year-old who knows nothing about our business is able to pull off a pretty convincing letter. And without verification process, maybe she would have fallen for it. Now imagine a well-funded business using the latest technologies whose sole goal is to rip us off. This is the urgency that we have to have in acting here, because we can't wait to be defrauded. Fact is that fraud frequency and sophistication are climbing, and I'd argue that fraudsters are becoming more brazen. Now that we're relying on email more, it's harder and harder for us to be able to verify information. It's easier and easier for fraudsters to infiltrate our workflows. What's more, once we're defrauded, it could take months of rework and investigation to try and recover what meager funds we can get. And the bottom line here is that proactive prevention is cheaper and safer than trying to claw it all back. Dom, we know AP leaders are concerned about all this, but you talk to a lot of CFOs. Just how concerned is senior management about their company's risks these days?
I mean, it is constant top of mind, Mark. It is at the end of the day, right? The line of defense between cash on hand or cash on someone else's hands, right? And it is so easy to make mistakes, to fall for this fraudsters. You were mentioning about the invoice. I've seen also the ones where someone just goes to that inbox mail and just grab that invoice and essentially just replicates it right there and puts it in their bank account. Not only is a real invoice already with information about the vendor, the client, we have often given up a little bit of security for convenience, right? And so vendors are now sending you an invoice and conveniently saying, this is the bank account where I want you to pay me. So again, we are kind of giving our convenience in some cases for the security for the convenience. Well, that is probably one of the easiest ways to commit the fraud, because here is the invoice. I'm waiting for it. Here is the bank account they want me to pay, and I'm going to pay it promptly. And so it just goes, right? Especially if it is a manual process. So it is something that I immediately connected with as you were giving that example, Mark. Very vivid, seen it in person, very real.
Yeah. So the reality is for many AP departments is that the way we do things is unwittingly leaving us vulnerable to fraud. Now, I know we all have the best intentions. We all know the expectations on us to help safeguard the company's finances. We're not intentionally doing things wrong, but the reality is that our antiquated and outdated manual processes are leaving us vulnerable. Consider the way that we go about onboarding vendors. As I told you, only about 1 in 5 organizations today have an automated onboarding process with automated verification and validation. The problem is that vendor onboarding is where fraud often starts. It's the front door in many cases. Think about it. If we send prospective vendors a PDF packet to complete, there's a pretty good chance that that could be intercepted via email. If we don't validate bank ownership or TIN data, we're never quite sure exactly who it is that's on the other side of that email or phone call. If we have inconsistent approval tracking across our departments, it's easy for things to go for oversights or corners to be cut. Some people still don't believe that vendor verification is their job. We also find that fraudsters are eager to exploit unclear accountability and siloed systems. Fraudsters thrive in environments where there's delays and there's poorly organized information. In many cases, they count on it. We also see, however, that once a supplier is onboarded, that the threats don't stop. As Dom was saying, invoices that are emailed can easily be intercepted, edited, or duplicated. This is particularly true if your suppliers have been hacked. Have you had a frank discussion with your suppliers about how it is they're safeguarding their information? Are you sure the checks they have in place to make sure that the information they're presenting is legit? What's more, while I know AP folks have a love-hate relationship with purchase order matching, the reality is that PO matching is another way to help ensure that fake invoices don't slip through the cracks. It's another check and balance, if you will. What's more, when you rely on emails, we know that for routing invoices for approval, we know that they don't ensure separation of duty. They don't have systematic workflows and they don't have audit logging of all the actions taken on that invoice. So while emails might seem convenient for routing invoices to remote or on the go workers, the reality is it was never built for the type of sensitive information that we're pushing through it. We also find that when we're manually reconciling our transactions, that creates delays that allows fraudsters to operate. In many cases, if we don't reconcile in a timely manner, we won't be able to identify fraud until it's too late. And while reconciliation won't prevent fraud, it will allow you to spot it sooner so you could take action faster. And what's more is slow approvals delay fraud detection and payments. And that is our next risk in the AP process flow, the way we go about paying our suppliers. Many of you still rely on spreadsheet tracking of which payments are going out the door. Maybe your printing paper checks still represents the lion's share of financial losses and still the most insecure payment method. So this will be the PSA where I tell you to move as many of your suppliers as possible to electronic payments. I know you've heard the lecture before, but this is yet another reason to do so. What's more, in a check environment or antiquated payment processing environment, you probably don't have tools for being able to track things. This is particularly true with checks, or to be able to identify unusual payment timing or frequency. Wait, why are we sending 10 payments to Dom this month when usually I only send them one? And finally, we find that outdated ERPs don't integrate real-time fraud monitoring. So it really is up to AP. Dom, when we put it all together, supplier onboarding, invoice processing, and payments to suppliers, really seems like there's vulnerabilities all across the invoice to pay lifecycle.
Absolutely, and 100%, Mark. And if we think about the things that can be so simply or so subtle changed from one vendor to the next, someone could change the address where they want their payment sent to, right? Someone could just change the contact info, and everything remains the same. There are small areas where things can change that expose us and make us vulnerable. I was thinking as you were speaking about ways that we can protect ourselves and defend ourselves. And oftentimes, vendor risk management, which you pointed out just a minute or two ago, often sounds like, yes, it's one of those things that I have to check off so IT gets off my back, right? It is that vendor that they're just going to do this one thing for me, and they are low risk. So how bad can things go? And you're right, it probably won't with them. Is the person that may impersonate them down the road, right? That may actually be the case. So having a good vendor risk management, or also known as TPMS and TPRM in your business, or other processes for validating a customer and customer risk, and understanding when change is being implemented, because you have a system that would track that change, may trigger and give you some alerts. But not everybody can afford those systems, right? And if automation is the way to go, well, that's where we need to make sure that things are checked, because automation will never question us. It will want to do the same thing time and time again.
Yeah. Dom, what's the most common thing you see AP departments that operate in a manual or semi-automated environment doing that makes you cringe the most from a fraud mitigation standpoint?
It's interesting, and you mentioned something earlier that made me think. Sometimes fraud happens indirectly for the most unwilling reasons, right? We are trying all to do the right thing. I need to make sure that my business doesn't halt and that that payment doesn't get there late. And I work with a lot of AP folks. We know we will wait until the very last day to pay that invoice, but then we have it all up on us. Um, you know, we have touched on so many things, right? We are policers. We need to keep the organization running. We have timelines that we have to make sure that we meet, and that unfortunately allows us to cut corners and make mistakes, human errors. The craziest thing I saw, um, not the craziest. One of the things I saw was, paying a credit memo, as opposed to holding the credit. So now I'm not only out, an invoice amount that should have been returned to me, something to the tunes of maybe $100,000. That credit memo that came back, I went ahead and paid it again. So it created a situation where now how do I get two credit memos? And when he gets back here, right, I get it back. There are so many things that we see, that we come across, and those are the things that inspired us to ensure that we look out for those edge cases that someone may not ever even be thinking about.
Yeah. And manual processes really do compound all the risk of these new sophisticated schemes that we're seeing. Delays and duplicate payments, that erodes trust and efficiency. If we don't have audit trails, we can never be so sure of who did what and certainly not why. In many cases, we find that teams are in a reactive and not a proactive state when it comes to fraud. And risk exposure increases with every manual step. And that brings us to our next poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. This time, I want to know, where is your AP process the most vulnerable to fraud? Where do you believe your AP process is the most vulnerable to fraud? Do you believe it's vendor onboarding and validation? Do you believe it's invoice receipt and approval? Do you believe it's payment authorization and release? Do you believe all three of those are equally vulnerable to fraud? Or do you believe there's something else in your AP department that leaves you most vulnerable to fraud? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Are you seeing more AP departments automating their invoice to pay process because of the risks associated with fraud, Dom?
Absolutely. I mean, we years ago, I've been with the onPhase organization now running on to 6 years, and the company had already adopted security first, right? It's not just a way of living these days, but customers would demand that whoever they are working with is has a good security posture. I personally identify very well with that, and it is something that we are very proud of. We follow very closely. We commit to exercising type 2 SOC 2 compliance. Means that every single day you must prove or be able to prove that you follow all the protocols and procedures and standards that you are required to follow. So it is very top of mind. It is very important in every day. Every customer nowadays is one of those things that we are so upfront with that we just recently, earlier this year, published our trust page. Like, it is so easily requested, or so frequently requested, that it is out there. We invested with a third party partner so that we can provide our security posture, surface attacks, provide compliance documents, share our scores, right, publicly available on the internet. Um, we have folks that attempt to break through our systems and give us and provide us a score. It has to be one of the most important things. In addition to the automation, in addition to doing the work, if you can protect and guard that customer data, you're going to fall vulnerable pretty soon.
Let's see how our attendees responded to our poll question. We
Very
asked you,
interesting.
yeah, where is your AP process the most vulnerable to fraud? 41% of you believe it's in vendor onboarding and validation. I'm going to guess that a lot of you are doing it in a manual environment. Just going out on a limb there. 27% of you believe your invoice receipt and approval process is the most vulnerable to fraud. Only 5% of you believe payment authorization and release. But look at this, Dom. 23% of our attendees believe that across the invoice to pay lifecycle, they are vulnerable to fraud. These results don't surprise you, do they, Dom?
That's absolutely right. That is absolutely right.
Yeah, so what can we do about all this risk? Well, there's some best practices for fraud prevention and detection and response that Dom and I wanted to share with today. And the first is to fortify the front lines. You want to make sure everyone in your department understands their role in mitigating risk, and make no mistake about it. AP is the last line of defense when it comes to safeguarding a company's financial assets. It's not up to IT, it's up to us as AP leaders. And so one of the first things you can do is probably one of the easiest. Enforce multi-factor authentication for every part of your invoice to pay process. I know. It's a pain in the neck doing MFA. Who wants to grab their phone and punch in the code? But the reality is it's one of the easiest ways to thwart criminals, even if they have somehow gotten one of your employees' credentials. So make sure that every system in your AP department is using MFA, and every employee who uses those systems are using it all the time. What's more, you also want to make sure you require dual approvals for vendor onboarding and bank data changes, and you want to make sure they're enforced every time. Now, we'll talk about automation later, but ideally, this is an automated process. You also want to make sure you use positive pay for checks. I already lectured you about the need to pay your suppliers electronically, but let's be real. Dom and I recognize there will be times when you absolutely have to cut a paper check. For goodness sake, if you're going to do it, use positive pay. It's available from every bank and fintech these days. It is another way to help protect your payments. What's more, you also want to make sure you restrict access to your vendor master data by role and by function. That's the kind of information that bad actors, whether they're internal or external, would give their eye teeth to get a hold of. So we want to make sure that not everybody has access to your vendor master data. And you want to periodically make sure that you're monitoring what's going on. I know we have filthy vendor masters. It's terribly hard to keep them clean. But the reality is that this is another case where data hygiene is critical. The next best practice for mitigating your risk of fraud is to try to detect it in real time. Artificial intelligence is a great tool here. AI-based solutions for accounts payable processing can automatically detect anomalies in your payments and your invoice workflows. They're ideal for checking things like changes in the velocity or amount of invoices. If Dom typically sends me 2 invoices per month, why do I have 22? If Dom's invoice is typically for $3,000, why is this one for $73,000? And these are the ones where we focus our attention. What's more, AI doesn't just take a sample of your transactions to review, it reviews them all. So I know many of us just don't have the time to pour through every single payment and invoice that comes through to detect anomalies. What's more, many of us are relying on seasoned staff to intuitively know when something doesn't look right. Now that we're experiencing more turnover in our AP departments, we need to rely on automation to help us. What's more, we also want to make sure we use dashboards and alerts to flag unusual activity so that there's a queue for one or more people to review these transactions. And you want to make sure that you have complete audit logging of all actions taken on all vendor onboarding, invoices, and payments, and that's centralized so someone can periodically review it. The third best practice for mitigating your risk of fraud is to respond swiftly and smartly. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, holy mackerel, Mark, we're 39 minutes into this. You're supposed to tell us how to avoid fraud, and now you're telling us what to do when it occurs. Reality is that fraud isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when something could slip through the cracks. And maybe, I know we don't like to talk about it, it could be internal fraud. And so how your organization responds can be the difference between mitigating losses and creating a really painful event. So the first thing you want to do is plan today for the worst. You want to create an incident response playbook. What will happen if we experience fraud? Who's notified? What actions need to be taken? What systems need to be safeguarded? You want to define the escalation paths and communication rules. We want to make sure we don't blast this out willy-nilly and panic people. We also want to make sure we have an understanding of how it is our suppliers and our banks will be notified. You also want to make sure that the plan shows how it is you're going to involve IT, legal, and finance, say treasury, early in the response time. This can make or break your success. And finally, you want to make sure you conduct tabletop drills and lesson learned reviews. So test how the response plan works. And then if something should happen, make sure you do a post-mortem so you can learn from your experience. Your fourth best practice for mitigating your risk of fraud is to empower your people. I want you to create a culture of fraud mitigation in AP. Most of us take what I'd call a set it and forget it approach to training our staff when it comes to fraud. We sit down a new employee, we tell them the do's and don'ts, we pat them on their back, and we send them on their way. And we never revisit fraud until when? When something goes wrong. The problem is that fraud schemes are evolving so fast these days, and our teams are often so dispersed that we don't have that common set of knowledge. So what we need to do is make sure we educate our staff on what to look for. In the old days when we all worked in the office, we'd stand around the water cooler, the real one, not the proverbial one, and somebody would say, "Hey, you're not going to believe what someone tried to pull on me." And they'd share the story and everybody listened to it and they'd file it away in the back of their mind. But what would happen is they'd know what to look for. We've lost that now that we're working remotely, or at least part of the time. So we've got to find a way to catalog all of the different types of schemes we encounter, share them with our teams so they know the red flags and warning signs to look for, to make sure we reward people who report anomalies and celebrate those who stop them. And we also want to make sure that we train our staff to question things like urgent emails from a CFO. AP doesn't just have the power to say no. We have the obligation in some cases. We also need to make sure that everyone understands the implications of cutting any corners. So you have policies and procedures for how things are done. I don't doubt that. The question is how often are they enforced? And are you sure they're enforced every single time? So you want to create this report first culture without fear and blame. The fifth best practice is to create this fraud aware culture that we're talking about. So celebrate those staff who detect a suspicious activity. You want to make sure that in your weekly huddles or daily huddles that you periodically talk about fraud. Have lunch and learns that talk about the schemes that people are encountering. Share workshops such as the recording for this webinar with your team. You also want to make sure you integrate fraud checks into your daily workflows. Somebody should be periodically peering into what's going on to make sure there's no anomalies that are going unchecked, particularly if you have a small team. What's more, you want to make sure that everybody understands that security is everybody's responsibility. Dom, what do you believe is the single most important best practice for mitigating fraud?
I think you mentioned it quite a few times, actually, Mark, and it's so important. It's people, right? Invest in your people, encourage them, as you said. And every time you said, I'm like, well, there he is. He is really hitting the nail on the head because it is so important, right? We are the ones that are most vulnerable and we need to be, as you said, rewarded by when we do it, right? But when we do identify something that is wrong, one thing to help with that, we have gone out of our ways. Let's face it, security and compliance is a boring subject, right? We all have to follow it. Employees have to participate. We need a certain level of participation and engagement so that we can get the certification. How do we do it in a way that is engaging, rewarding? Find tools that are engaging, that are easy to do, that are not time consuming, that will allow you to get that response from customers. And I like the idea of rewarding, not just a pat in the back, yay, good job. Throw that $25 gift card to the folks in a given month that report the most phishing attacks. I'll tell you a quick anecdote
Mhm.
that kind of made me grin just a few weeks back. We use a number of tools to combat phishing attacks, train folks, train them without them thinking that they're getting trained, score their responses and whatnot. And every now and then we do catch those that fall for the email, clicking on this and clicking on that. We plant a lot of those things with the tools that we use. And so we kind of can see in the organizations who requires a little bit, who needs an extra couple of videos to be sent to them, without necessarily calling them out and calling their names. So in one of those events, about once a month in our weekly training video emails that we send out, we send a little phishing attack. We send our own internal thing. And so their job is to report it to IT, make it easy. It's a button in Outlook and they report it. And so when the first person reported it, well, IT saw the report, they jumped into action. They did not know that this email was going on. They ripped the email out of everyone's inbox and no one got to respond or take the test, if you will. And so, in a way, it turned out to be a test that IT reacted to before my employees reacted to. But that was the whole point of it, right? And we do this anonymously so that even my own team doesn't know that this is happening at times. That wasn't the intended consequence that day, but you know what? I'll take the win in either way it comes.
I love it. I love it. One of the things employees need to be on the lookout for is phony bank account change requests. And one of the questions I get asked often is, all right, so how can I tell a fake from the real McCoy? There's a few things that we'd like you to share with your team. Look for things like slightly altered domain. I think earlier Domingo mentioned an I versus an L, urgent, pushy, emotional tone, right? Final notice, you must do this immediately, particularly if it's coming from a CFO. Maybe it's vague or missing context. Sometimes folks want to intentionally write in such a way that they can kind of gloss over the fact they don't know everything about the account. Maybe it's asking the person or urging the person, reply via the email, don't call. Or call this new representative who probably isn't in your vendor master database. Maybe the emails are sent in the middle of the night and maybe they have some suspicious looking attachments. These are the types of things that can help suggest that a bank account change request is a phony. That brings us to our next poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. This time I want to know, which of the following best describes your fraud prevention approach? Which of the following best describes your fraud prevention approach? Is it manual controls? You use email, phone, spreadsheets? Is it some automation with manual checks? Is it fully automated workflows with built-in controls, hopefully with great modern technology? Is it AI-powered fraud detection? Or are you not sure? Or you know you need to improve? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Many folks have said that AI is going to be a game changer when it comes to fraud detection, Dom. Just how bullish are you on AI-powered solutions helping to stop fraudsters in their tracks?
I'm watching the responses, Mark, and I'm a bit surprised, right? And then right to the point of your question. Listen, AI is here, whether some of us believe it or not, right? It is here to stay. It is here to grow. It is moving at crazy lightning fast speed. Warning, it's just filled with junk around it, right? Maybe 20% of what you hear out there being conservative is true AI advancements that are being made. And so the important thing is to understand where AI is really going to add value into your organization. I believe fraud is an amazing use case for that, right? Detecting the abnormal, the things we are not consciously looking for, right? Anomaly detection, we defer to it as that. Invoices are coming in. You made a few references earlier. Invoices are coming in, and Dom usually sends me this invoice, and it's once a month. But you also get 3 other 1,000 invoices every month. You're not just looking out for my invoices, are you? And so, what can be trained to look for these things so that it can help you and help protect you in this journey? I think AI will have a lot of very good, very valid cases. We are investing quite a bit to make sure that we are finding the right areas where AI is going to create impact. For instance, not just in security, but those tedious tasks, things that you do day in, day out. Maybe it is coding. I don't know. Maybe it is validating or verifying data. Areas where we see real impact. A chatbot, maybe not. You don't want to have a conversation with your invoices and see where they're doing. I think there are some cases that we can argue around that. But security is definitely an area where AI is breaking ground big time.
We asked our attendees which of the following best describes your fraud prevention approach. Well, you've got some work to do, Dom, because none of our attendees are currently using AI-powered fraud detection. 21% of our attendees admit they rely on manual controls such as email, phone, and spreadsheets. 32% of our attendees have some automation, but they still rely on manual checks. And another 32% of our attendees are using fully automated workflows with built-in controls. Fact is that automation can help you strengthen your defenses, and that's especially true with the built-in controls that are in these solutions. It eliminates a lot of the manual entry points that are vulnerable to manipulation. It applies consistent controls across all workflows. There's no corner cutting. There's no judgment that we're depending on. It integrates all across the invoice to pay process. So whether it's onboarding or invoice receipt, or yes, even payment processing, you can have a single platform that provides you with complete visibility and consistent control. Centralization, normalization, standardization, all those zations, they're a great tool against fraudsters. What's more, it reduces human error through guided rules-based approval workflows. It ensures that the processes are being adhered to. One of the key things that an automated solution does is it uses embedded financial controls, things like automated approval hierarchies. So you can be sure that there is segregation of duties and there's no corner cutting. It can automate the process of verifying bank account ownership, not just making sure that the account is open, but that the name on the account matches the name of your supplier, that it's located in the same supplier where you're in the same country where your supplier is located, that it actually is an account that hasn't been recently opened. Things like that can help give you peace of mind. What's more, today's invoice to pay solutions provide digital audit trails that simplify compliance. Compliance is a yawn in an automated environment, and it provides role-based permissions to ensure that only those people who need to access certain functions are able to do so. Automated solutions also provide you with visibility and intelligence. Real-time dashboards let you see exactly where things are in the process and who's doing what. Instant alerts flag unusual payment activities. You can see trend analysis, so you're able to identify those anomalies that might bear a little closer scrutiny, and you could generate reports to help you quantify your fraud exposure. What's more, an invoice to pay solution allows you to pay your suppliers electronically in the most secure environment possible. It encrypts payment data, it masks bank details, it segregates duties, it automates those approvals, cycles, and it provides you with visibility all across the payment lifecycle so you know exactly where things stand. What's more, automated invoice to pay solution reconciles those payments automatically with your ERP and accounting system so that you're immediately able to surface any issues. That brings us to our final poll question, which is
Look at
now
that.
displayed on your screen. This time we want to know, what's your organization's top priority for strengthening AP security? What's your organization's top priority for strengthening AP security? Is it automating supplier verification and onboarding? Is it moving from checks to electronic payments? Is it enhancing staff fraud awareness training? Is it improving visibility and reporting across AP? Or is it something else? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Dom, every AP solutions provider will claim that their solution offers top-notch security. What are some questions I can ask a prospective technology provider to ensure that they really do mitigate my risk of falling victim to fraud?
Audits, audits, and audits, right? That who is touching my information? Who has access to it? You probably noticed when the first few slides when we were talking about compliance, right? This is a security topic, but we have HIPAA there, and the reason for that, we serve a lot of our healthcare customers. Their data, their information is very important. So knowing who is seeing patient record, for example, if that's what happens to be involved, right? An insurance company is billing a vendor for whatever medication or whatever tool or whatever device, right? At the end of the day, there is a customer record in there. So we need to know who touched that and when and why and can keep that trail. So that is one of the most important tools that we have because oftentimes, if the fraud does happen, you want a paper trail. You want to know how we got there and who it went through. If you have a data leak, something that escaped your organization, who touched it, who last had access, because maybe that person that last touched it wasn't really the person you thought you were. Maybe they were compromised and they are now part of your organization. So audit is an extremely important tool, in my opinion.
39% of you said enhancing staff fraud awareness training is your organization's top priority for strengthening AP security. So how do we do it? Well, here's your action plan to protect your department. There's 4 steps we want you to keep in mind. Number 1, assess your current risk. Understand where those gaps are in your process. Understand what the skills and knowledge base of your team is. Modernize your workflows. If you're relying on emails to route invoices and payment approvals, you are vulnerable. You also want to make sure you choose the right solutions provider, as Dom just articulated. You want to make sure you have the right solution in place. And finally, you want to make sure you measure, maintain, and improve. Constantly be vigilant about the need to mitigate your risk. Dom, we have just a moment for you to give parting advice to our attendees.
What a fantastic timing. Mark, you are amazing. I couldn't have recorded this and timed it that well. Any questions? I want to actually give a moment to folks and see if they have any questions that maybe we have time to answer. If we don't get to the questions, if you have to leave, if we get off and then you have follow-ups, as Mark mentioned, team will follow up, collect your questions, and then we'll respond to them. Payments, automating, using electronic forms of payments, right? It is hard. We understand the process change, but also companies evolve, times evolve, and obviously fraudulent mistakes can be very, very costly. So invest in automation. Electronic payments is the future. There are so many benefits related to that. Not just the automation aspect of it, but there are so many benefits. Reach out to someone, ask questions, and we'll be more than happy to give you responses that you're looking for.
And that will be our final word. Hey, Dom, thanks so much for sharing all your insights with us today. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. On behalf of Dom and onPhase, this is Mark Brousseau. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Hope to speak with you all again soon.
Pleasure to see you all. Goodbye.